What is going on, guys, and welcome. In this video we're going to talk everything about CSS selectors, and we're going to start with the most basic one, which is going to be universal selector. So here you can see that we have a heading 1 over here, then we have heading 3, and then we'll have 4 paragraphs, right? So if I go to main CSS over here, and if I'm just going to use the star over here, this is going to be a universal selector. So pretty much what it means is it's going to select all the elements that we have over here, right? So obviously in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So over here, if I'm going to say this is going to have a color, right? And let's say over here this is going to be red, right? So all of them are going to have a font color red, right? So even if I'm going to go over here and I'm going to copy this guy, right? So I'm going to say I'm a paragraph, right? And over here, I'm going to say I'm added, right? Just so we can see that I'm not doing any funny business, right? So over here, you can see that this still is going to be red, right? And it works obviously not just with this property, right? If we're going to go over here and we're going to say something like background color. So I'm going to say background color and we're going to say black, right? Then we're going to say a font size, right? You can see that all of them are going to work, right? So this is, let's say, going to be like 30 pixels, right? So now I can see how big our fonts became, right? So over here, I'm going to delete this and let's see where you would actually use this, right? Because obviously this is not how you would style everything because you would want a different style, right? Well, actually where you would use it is if you would want a padding and margin to be 0, right? So pretty much you just would want to get rid of default styles, right? So I'm going to say over here, padding 0. And I'm going to margin 0, right? So for all the elements, you can see what happened, right? So now you can see that all of the elements are padding and margin 0. So now if I would want to go, let's say, to this heading 1, right? I'm going to go say heading 1, and I would say that I would want a margin, let's say, of 20 pixels, right? And then padding of, let's say, 10 pixels, right? You can see that I can separately, right, make each element look like how I would want, right? So basically this is where you would mostly use this. And next one up would be a type selector in CSS. So what is a type selector? Well, we're basically very easily, right, we just select an element by writing what is the tag name, right? So for heading 1 we would write h1, heading 3 we would write heading 3, and obviously for paragraph, I mean, it's self-explanatory, we would write a paragraph, right? And again, it would work obviously in all the elements, not just these ones, but just for simple examples we're keeping like this, right? So here I'm going to say heading 1, and let's say over here that I'm going to say that this is going to have a background color, right? And I'm going to say something like green over here. Then I'm going to say a font size over here, and I'm going to say like 25 pixels, right? So you can see that I'm targeting only heading 1, right? And obviously if I would want to do something with a heading 3, right, over here I can just copy this guy over here, and then I can say heading 3, right? And here I can do a separate way, right? I can just write over here font size, let's say this is going to be 10 pixels, right? So much less. Background color, let's say red, right? So you can see how this one is changing, but we can also group them, right? So let's say if the style would be the same, right? It's not like we've over here for the paragraph, right? We would write the same, right? So we have background color green and font size 25, right? So if I'm going to just copy and paste this, right, over here like this, and I copy and paste this, and you can see I made a little bit of a mistake because I need to paste them together, right? So you can see right now that the paragraph is the same as heading, right? But what we actually can do, right, we don't need to rewrite this like for each single element, right? What we can do is we can group them together, right? So over here, if I place a comma, right, and I'm just going to write paragraph, right, you can see that now it also selects all the paragraphs, right? And obviously here we can write as many elements we want, right? So let me just get rid of this heading 3, right? And over here, if I place another comma, or here I can just say that it would be targeting all of them right now, right? Because I have heading 1, and I have paragraph and heading 3. And this is how we can work with a type selector in CSS. And next ones up are going to be ID and class selectors. So for them, we obviously would need actually an attributes of an ID and class. So here I'm going to say ID, and I'm going to say this is going to be main, right? So I'm going to do like this. I'm going to say this is going to be main. This is going to be my ID. And over here for the class, we're going to do very simple. We're going to say class, and over here we're going to say this is going to be red. And then we can just copy and paste this guy, right? So this is going to be red, and we're going to copy this guy, and over here I'm going to copy and paste over here, and that one we're going to change actually to green, right? So this one is going to be red again, right? And this is going to be green, right? So we're going to go over here. I'm going to make a space, and then if that one was red, this is going to be green over here, and this guy is going to be green, right? So we have two classes and we have one ID. And obviously we go back to main CSS over here, and to target an ID, we would have a hashtag, right? And I'm going to say main, and obviously main, the names need to match over here. And you can see that now I'm targeting the heading with an ID of main, right? So over here, I'm going to say that, let's say again, we'll do a simple background color, right? Over here, red, then the font size. And again, I can add as many properties I would want, right? And there's no point of repeating, right? The main ID over here, if we want to target, right, the ID attribute, we would have to use a hashtag and the name for that ID. But remember that IDs need to be unique, right? So with the classes, right, over here we use two classes for each, right? For each class we use two elements, right? So here, if I'm going to say that this is going to be red, right? So if I want to target the class of red, I have to have a dot over here and the name of the class. And over here, you can see that now it's selecting over here like this. So we save this. And let's say over here, we're going to say that this is going to be a background color, right? And we're going to say, let's say black over here like this, right? So both of them have a background color black. And then we're going to have a color. I'm going to say red over here like this, right? So this is going to be for a red classes, right? And if I'm going to copy this, and you can see that over here, the only thing I'm going to change is green. Here like this, green, and over here we're going to say background color black, but this is going to be color is going to be green, right? So now with the classes we can apply it to as many elements as we want, right? The same class, right? So if I would want to go back to this guy, right, to number 5, right, I could add any of these classes, either red or green, right? But for IDs, keep them unique, because that's the whole point of an ID. Now we're going to head back and cover more selectors. So we're going to cover selectors in more depth, right? So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to say this is going to be heading 1 over here like this. I'm going to say ID, and let's say this is going to be 1, right? And then I'm going to say that I am heading, right, with an ID, right, over here like this. Then over here, we're going to create a paragraph, and then we're going to say the paragraph is going to have class over here, and we're going to say generic over here like this. And we're going to say I am paragraph generic, right? So I am generic paragraph. So generic over here like this. And then we're going to say that this is going to be regular paragraph over here like this. And we're going to say that this is going to have no classes. So I'm going to say I am a simple paragraph over here like this. And then we're going to create a unordered list over here like this. And we're going to say this is going to be an unordered list. And then within the unordered list, we're going to have a list item over here. We're going to write that this is going to be home. And then we're going to copy this one, let's say 2 times, right? So over here 1 and over here 2. And then we're going to have over here a ordered list, right? So over here within the home, right, we're going to have a ordered list over here like this. And we're going to say this is going to be home item over here. And then we're going to copy these guys too. Right, so here 1, 2, and total is going to be 3. And then we're going to continue with our unordered lists, right? So I'm going to say list item over here, and then we're going to say this is going to be about, and this is also going to have a class. I'm going to say that class is going to be generic also, right? So the same for the paragraph. So generic over here, generic over here. The more important thing is they should match, right? And over here, we're just going to create a few more list items, right? And we're going to have the same ones, right? So we're going to say about, and let's say we're going to have like 2 more, right? So now we have generic one, and then we have an about, right? So let's head right now to main CSS and start working with our selectors. So obviously we should be already familiar with an ID, right? We can say 1 over here, and the background color, and we're going to start as always with a red, right? So obviously only the ID gets actually targeted, right? Because the ID with a name of 1. Then over here we have a class, and we're going to say generic over here, and we're going to say the background color, and we're going to use a yellow, right? So now you can see that again, as always, we're targeting 2 classes, right? Because both of these elements have the class, right? So after that, we would want a simple one, right? So we're just going to say that this is going to be paragraph over here. And with the paragraph, we're going to say that this is going to be background color. And let's say we're going to say blue, right? Now, the thing is, you can see that only this paragraph gets selected, right? Because obviously over here we have a more specific one, right? So this one has a class, and over here we're just targeting a paragraph, right? And both of them should be, but since this class is actually has a background color also, obviously this overwrites it, right? And these are the things we should already know about, right? So let's go ahead and let's talk about descendant selectors. So if I write over here ULLI over here like this, and then I'm going to say that this is going to be background color. And we're using the background colors because, again, in my opinion, it's the most easiest one to see. And if I go with this aqua, right, so we can see right away that, first of all, we're targeting all the LIs, right? But again, remember this guy, right? Because it has the class, right, it actually overwrites it, right? So let's keep moving on, and let's go to direct children, right? So if I'm going to say ordered list, LI, or here like this, and then I'm going to say that what would be the background color, right? And let's say pink over here, right? Nothing happens because I'm a moron and I actually over here messed it up, right? So over here, if this is the list item, right? So this should be an ordered list, right? And then we should be creating a list items. So what I need to do over here is we need to delete this guy, right? And actually create a list items over here like this. And then we're going to say home and about, right? Sorry about that, guys. Over here, what we need to do over here, just delete this and just copy these list items, right? 1, 2, right? And now we can see that if we're targeting just children, right, over here, just an ordered list and just the children of ordered list. Now after that, what I would want to cover is actually if I go with LI, right, then I'm going to say the class, which is generic over here like this. And then I'm going to say that actually I would want to change the background color, right? So I'm going to say again background color, and in this case we're just going to say this is going to be something like beige, right? So you see what happened. This actually we can write it like this, right? So we have the element over here, then we right away write the class, right? And over here we need to use the same way, right? We have the dot, and then we have the class. And also obviously the same way we could have done it with an ID, right? So if I write the same way, it's going to work like this, right? So heading 1 and ID over here, right? And we can just delete this one, right? But with ID, it obviously doesn't make much sense because already ID should be unique, right? But in general here, you can see, right, that we're targeting over here this LI with a class of generic, right? And this actually overwrites the class. And after that, let's look at a few more, right? We're going to have LI, we're going to say generic, but what if we would write something like this, right? Plus, and over here, LI, right? What's going to happen is background color, and again, the hardest part is going to be selecting the color, and color brown, right? You can see that this guy turns brown. And the reason is that this is going to be adjacent sibling, right? So the moment over here, the next LI actually is going to have a selector, right? So we're selecting class generic, and right away the next adjacent sibling over here, this LI. And then also over here, what we can do another one, right? We're going to say LI, we're going to say generic, and then what we're going to say is over here, left hand side from number 1, over here we select this one, right? Again, find number 1 on your keyboard and right next to the left over here, this guy. And then we're going to say LI, right? And what's going to happen is we're going to be targeting all the siblings, right? So over here, I'm going to say background color, and we had the pink, we had the brown, we had the beige, I don't know, coral, right? And now you can see that we're targeting all of them, right? So if I'm going to go back over here, and we're going to add some more list items over here, right? So 4, 6, whatever, right? So this is going to be targeting all the siblings over here that are going to be after class of LI. And this is just to show you that selectors get way more complicated than just one ID and one class and one type, right? So we're really getting into the weeds, and we're actually going to continue doing that just so we can become experts in CSS. Next, we're going to cover pseudo-class selectors. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this headings and paragraphs, and obviously we're going to recreate them later on if we'll need them, right? But over here, what I'm going to say that this is going to be a input, or here like this type, we're going to say this is going to be text, or here like this, and then over here what we're going to do is we're just going to say a placeholder, right? not a pattern, placeholder over here, placeholder. And then we're going to say this is going to be something like hello world. Right, so we're here like this, hello world. And what we can do is we can just save this and let's say have a few of them, right? So over here we're going to have, let's say 4 input boxes, right? So we're going to keep them all the same. And over here we're going to create some links. Over here like this, we're going to have a link. The href, we're going to have a dummy one. Over here like this, we're going to say hashtag. And over here we're going to say Google. Right, so this is going to be our link. And let's just copy this guy too. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So now we save this and we go to main CSS, and the first pseudo class we're going to learn is going to be hover. And it's basically as we're hovering, right, as the cursor is going over the element, right? So over here, what I'm going to say is that for a link, I'm going to say hover over here like this. And then I'm going to say, let's say again, keep it simple, color, we're going to say red, right? So we'll go back over here. You can see as I'm hovering over the links, right, the color is actually changing to red, right? So this would be the first pseudo class, right? So this is going to be the cover class. Now after that, let's look at a actual active, right? So over here, I'm going to say active over here like this. And then I'm going to say this would have a background color. And I'm going to say something like green over here like this. So if we go back over here, now you can see that nothing is changing, right? I still have the hover effect. However, as I click the actual link, right, you can see the background color is changing, right? But the moment I actually let go of my mouse, right, you can see it disappears, right? So it only works as I'm clicking over here like this, right? Now, next one, let's look at how it would work with a inputs, right? So here we have for the links, right? So let's work with inputs. So here for the input, let's say over here, that I would have a background color, right? So I'm going to say over here, hover, over here like this, and I'm going to say background color. And let's say we're going to go with something like blue, over here like this. So if we go back over here, you can see as I'm hovering over the inputs, right, the background color is changing to blue, right? And now let's look at the last one over here. We're going to say input, and we're going to say focus over here like this, and we're going to say focus. Now what happens with focus, right? With the focus, let's do a border color. Border color over here, and we're going to say something like red over here. Or you know what? Let's just do border. Let's do 5 pixels solid red over here like this. So you can see what happens, right? Again, as I'm hovering, nothing is changing. However, once I click the actual checkbox, right, where I'm actually working, right, you can see what happens. And right now I have a border that is 5 pixels solid red, right? But the rest of them only work if I'm hovering, right? If I change it, right, you can see over here this guy, right? So again, the actual border is changing. And this is how we can work with pseudo-class selectors in CSS. And next, we're going to look at attribute selectors in CSS. And for that, first, we're going to create some links. So here, I'm going to say this is going to be A. And the href over here, we're going to start with a dummy link over here like this, right? So we're going to say that this is going to be empty link over here. Then we're going to copy this guy over here. Let's say 3 more times, right? Over here, we're going to say this is going to be index.html, right? So this is technically could be our home page. So here I'm going to write this is going to be home page, home, over here like this. Then over here, this is going to be Google. So we're going to go over here, HTTP, over here like this. And then we're going to say this is going to have a /, and this is going to be www.google.com over here. And we're going to say over here, this is going to be Google over here. And we might as well maybe create a blank, right? So here we're going to say target, and we're going to say blank, right? Just so we don't mess up our live preview over here like this. And then we have empty, then we have a Google, and the last one is going to be google.org, right? So maybe we can just delete this guy and just copy everything from there. We're just going to change some stuff around, right? So delete this guy, select the whole thing over here. And over here, we're going to change it to google.org, right? Now that we have created the links, let's go ahead over here and let's just check it, right? So over here, this is going to be Google, right? So this is going to go to Google. And over here, this guy is going to go to google.org, right? So over here, you can see that this is going to be a different website, right? They're not going to be the same. So I'm going to close these ones for now over here. And let's just go to main CSS and start working with our attribute selectors, right? So if I go over here, and if I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna say that this is gonna be square brackets, right? And if I'm just gonna write href, right? If I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna say background color, and let's say background color, we're gonna set it to red, right? So you can see what happens right away, right? So all the links are gonna have the actual background color of black, right? I'm sorry, red. And over here you can see how we did it, right? So as long as the links, right, which in most cases they're gonna have an href, right? As long as we have links that actually have an href, right, then the actual property and the value is gonna match, right? So let's go ahead and let's be more specific, right? So what if over here I'm gonna say that href, right? But not only href, right? I'm gonna say href that has a value of hashtag, right? And over here I'm gonna say that this should have a font size over here, font size, and I'm gonna say 30 pixels, right? So you can see that only the first one got that, right? Because the other ones actually don't have the value. The values are different, right? So one is gonna be index HTML, the other one is gonna be Google, right? So if we work like this, right? If we actually set the value, right, we can start being more precise, right? So now I'm only targeting the hashtag values, right? And we can obviously go a more specific, right? So here I'm going to say that this would be href, right? Link that has an href. However, over here I'm going to say that only if it starts with certain things, right? So if I write over here this little symbol over here like this, and then I say equal to, right? And I'm going to say this is going to be HTTP over here like this, right? And if I'm going to say that this is going to have a background color, I'm going to say, let's say green, right? So you can see only the two that actually go to Google, right, have this, right? Because I'm saying, listen, only if the href starts with HTTP, then I actually want to target this, right? And as you can see over here, this guy, right, the index actually starts with, obviously with index HTML, right? So you can see over here that it's only targeting the two links that actually start with this, right? That start with HTTP. Now, obviously, since we have a start with, we also have end with, right? So here I'm going to say href again. So we're going to writing href over here, and then we'll have a $sign, and again the same thing equal. And I'm going to say for now, I'm going to say, let's say .com, right? And what we should do, let's say we're going to have a background color of, let's say, I don't know, yellow, right? So background color, yellow, right? So again, only this guy, right? Because it ends with .com, right? And just to stay consistent, right? Let's go over here and let's say that we would have an href, right? And again, I'm going to say it like this, href, right? And now what I'm going to say that it ends, but I'm going to say with HTML, right? So if I write over here and if I say HTML over here like this, and let's say I'm going to say this is going to have font size, and we're going to go, let's say, with like something like 40 pixels, right? So you can see that this guy became 40 pixels, right? Because obviously this one ends with HTML. And what I'm showing you right now is the attribute of href, right? But it would obviously work with any attribute, right? Now, it probably wouldn't make sense if you're targeting a class because you can just target a class anyway, right? But if you have multiple classes, you can also work the same way, right? So you can have a class name over here, right? Which is going to be an href, right? But instead, this is going to be a class, right? And then you have class that starts with something or ends with something, right? And this is how we can work with attribute selectors in CSS. And the next selector we're going to cover in CSS is going to be very powerful, and that's going to be not selector. So over here, I'm going to create a paragraphs, and I'm going to say this is going to have a paragraph. Over here, I'm going to say class. And over here, I'm going to say, let's say again, red, right? So let's go with the same one. I'm going to say I am red over here like this. And then we're just going to copy this guy over here. And I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4 over here like this. So there's going to be 5 of them. And then let's change this one, the second one, and the fourth one over here like this. So if I'm going to press command, and I'll have both of them, right? And I'm going to say over here green. And obviously, let's change this one around too, right? So this is going to be green. Here like this, green. And then this guy, we're going to say this is going to be special, right? So I'm going to say over here special. And for now, let's just get rid of the class anyway, right? So we're going to go over here. And if we go to main CSS, and if we use a not selector, right? And I already have the example over here, right? So let's say I'm going to say over here paragraphs, right? So obviously if I would want to target all the paragraphs, I would just write my property and value over here, right? But what if I write over here not, over here like this, and then I have over here you can see a selector, right? And over here what I'm going to say that within these parentheses, I'm going to target all of them, right, that do not have class, right? And in this case, this is just going to be one. So if I'm going to write over here an attribute, which is going to be name of class, and right now if I'm going to write a rule, right, you can see right away brackets is telling me, right, that I'm selecting the paragraph that is I am special. And over here I'm going to say font size, and I'm going to say, let's say something like 40 pixels, right? And sure enough, you can see what happens, right? The pixels, the font size actually changed to this guy, to the last one. That I'm selecting all the paragraphs that do not have the attribute of the class, right? Now I can also do it a little bit differently, right? So let's say over here I have a class of special, right? So over here I'm going to say class, and I'm just going to give it a class of special. Special over here. And if I go back over here, and let's say again, I'm just going to delete this and we're going to start from fresh, right? So I'm going to say paragraph, not over here. Then this is going to be selector, right? And now I'm going to say that does not have a class of special, right? So I can write it like this, right? So this is going to be the class name, right? And I'm going to say, you can say that font size over here, and we're going to say something like 30 pixels. And then we're going to say, let's say a background color, let's say is going to be black, right? So again, you can see that I'm targeting all of them, right? And apart from the fact that the ones that has the class of special, right? And obviously in our case, we would just say that paragraph that would have a class of red, right? So here we're going to say red, and background color, I'm going to say red, or you know what, let's say color, right? So then we can see what we're having there, right? Red over here. And for the green one, we would flip it around, right? So we're just going to copy and paste this. And for the green over here, I would say that the color would be green, right? So we're going to go over here, green, right? And this is how it would work, right? But the most important thing that we need to remember is that for the not, right, we can either write obviously a class name, and we would obviously would work the same with an ID, or we can just target the whole attribute, right, with the class. Now let's look at before and after selectors. So here, if I'm going to create a paragraph and I'm going to say I am just a simple paragraph over here like this, and then we save this, and if we go to main CSS, right, and if we actually target this paragraph, and over here what I'm going to say is after, over here like this, and if we actually write this over here, now the one thing that we would need to do is actually have a property called content over here like this. So we have a content, and over here we can leave this empty, and we can actually create blocks out of this, right? But let's just start with a very simple one. We're just going to say this is going to be new, right? And you can see what happens, right? So you can see over here that this is going to be paragraph, right? And we have a new, right? Over here you can see that I'm writing with 2, right? But over here, if I create a space, right, I basically created on the fly, right? But because if we go and actually check this, there is no such element, right? However, if I'm writing over here this selector, right, I'm actually creating content over here, right? And the same thing we can do is for before, right? So if I'm going to go over here, and if I'm going to say before, right, and if I'm going to do the same thing, I'm going to say content, right? Because again, this is the most important thing for that, right? And I'm going to say this is going to be before, right? So you can see what happens, right? So basically, again, I'm just pretty much creating something that's not actually on my HTML, right? And I'm doing this just by using CSS, right? So how we would do it a little bit other way, right? What we can also do is, right, we can leave the content over here empty, right? But then we can say, let's say, well, first we're going to say width over here like this, and over here you can see that we need to put a colon, right, semicolon. And over here I'm going to say width 100 pixels. Then we're going to say height is also going to be 100 pixels, right? So we're going to say height is 100 pixels over here, right? Background color, we're going to say red over here, and display we're going to say block, right? So you can see what happens, right? I basically again created something that wasn't on my HTML by using this before and after, right? And obviously in this case, I just chose a paragraph, right? But we either could have had a links or headings or any kind of element that we would want, right? The main point is that we can do a lot of interesting things by using these selectors for after and before. And the next two selectors we're going to look at is going to be first line and first letter, and they're pretty self-explanatory, right? So here I'm going to write a paragraph, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a dummy text, right? So let's say over here we're going to say lorem, right? And we're just going to insert some text, right? And what we're going to do is maybe for this guy we're going to have a few of them, right? So this is going to have two, and over here we're going to create another paragraph that's only going to have one, right? So we'll have lorem, right? And over here you can see that it's still anyway 2 lines, right? But anyway, we have 2 paragraphs, right? And maybe over here we can just have a class, right? I'm just going to say first, right? So first over here. Now if we go back to main CSS, and we're going to say that paragraphs, right? And for all the paragraphs, right, we would want a first line, right? So here we're going to write like this, right? And we're going to have a first line. And over here what we're going to say is that this is going to be, let's say, color, right? And we're going to write red, right? So sure enough, right, for all of them, right, for all the paragraphs, the first line is actually going to be red, right? Now we also have a first letter, right? So let's say for the first, so I'm going to say class first, or here like this, and I'm going to say first letter, right? And I'm going to say that this is going to be font, or here size, and let's say 40 pixels, right? So now I can see that only the first letter over here got much bigger, right? So this is how we can use these first letter and first line selectors in CSS. Now let's look at a target selector in CSS, right? And for that, we're going to have to do a little bit of work in HTML, right? So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a unordered list, right? And over here, this is going to be a list item, right? And over here, we're going to have an href inside, right? So we're going to have a link over here, and we're going to say this one is going to be targeting 1, right? And href is actually going to be a hashtag one, right? So we're going to do it like this. This is going to be 1, and then we're going to copy and paste a few of them, right? So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And let's say these ones we're going to delete, right? And we're going to start from scratch, right? So we're going to delete these guys, and here I'm going to say this is going to be, let's say 2, right? This is going to be 3, and this is going to be 4. Right, so now we have 4 of them, and now let's make actual paragraphs, right? So here I'm going to say paragraph ID, and this is going to be 1, and we're going to have some dummy text, right? And what we were going to do right now, again, we're going to copy and paste and make 4 of them, right? So this is going to be 2 or here, and maybe, you know what, let's do this. Let's just save it. Let's hope that beautify, well, you know what, I actually copied this one. But let's just save it, and let's hope that the beautify will fix it, and it's going to look nicer in our HTML, right? So this is going to be 3, and this is going to be 4. Now that we have added our paragraphs, right, we also need to change over here these hrefs, right? So this is going to be 2 over here, this is going to be 3, and this is going to be 4, right? So now we jump to main CSS, right? And what I'm going to say over here, I'm going to say target over here like this. And then I'm going to say, let's say background color. We're going to say that this is going to be black, right? And then the color is going to be white, right? Or here like white, right? And you can see what's happening, right? So if I have a target, right, you can see that I have a background changing, right? And over here, the color is white, right? So as I'm selecting the links, right, you can see how everything else is changing, right? Now what we can also do, right, over here is we can use a not selector that we already learned before, right? So now I'm saying, listen, if I'm targeting something, right, I would want this background and the color to be white, right? But over here, what I can say is for the paragraphs, right, that are not, over here, not, and then I'm going to say target over here like this, right? So what should happen to them, right? So here we can write few things, right? So let's say we're going to say that first of all, font size, right? Or here, font size, let's say this is going to be 10 pixels, right? So you can see that if I'm not selecting them, the font size is going to go smaller. And then let's say, I don't know, opacity, right? So we can change opacity. We can say this is going to be 0.5, right? Or let's say 0.3 for that matter, right? So they pretty much disappear, right? And let's say for this guy, we're gonna do the opposite way, right? So font size over here, and we'll say 35 pixels, right? So they're much bigger, right? And what's happening is right now we combine two rules, right? So the first one would be target, right? If we're targeting something, but over here we can basically flip, right? So now you can see that 2 only is actually targeted and rest of them are not, right? So 3 and 4, I mean, and you understand the idea, right? So we can go on and on all day, but the whole point is we need to remember that we can select the target ones, right? And we can use the not over here, right? And we can actually, as an input, have a selector of target. Now let's talk about first of child selectors in CSS. And for that, we're going to create a unordered list over here like this. And then we're going to say that this is going to be list item. List item is going to have a link. Over here, we're going to say href, over here like this, hashtag. And let's say over here, we're going to say that this is going to be 1, over here like this. And then we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So over here, we're just going to copy this guy over here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And over here, we're going to write this is going to be 2. This is going to be over here 3. And then we're going to have a 4, 5, over here 5. Then this is going to be 6. This is 7 over here. And then we're going to have 8 and 9. 8 over here and 9. Right, so we'll have 9 list items, right? And what we would want to do if we would want to, let's say, target the first one and the last one, right? List item, right? Now we could obviously add a class, right? This will be one of the options, but let's say how we can do it just by using CSS, right? Without adding classes. And what we can do over here, I can say list item, and over here I can say, let's say this is going to be first child, over here like this. And now we're going to say this is going to have a background color, let's say red, right? Now everything is easy, right? Everything is nice and dandy. What we need to remember though is we are targeting list item, right? Only if it is actually the first child, right? And I'm actually going to show you how we can make a mistake, right? If we forget this. Over here we can write a last child also, right? So let's say last child. And I'm going to say this is going to be a background color, say green, right? So you can see that, right? We're targeting number 1 and the last one, right? So the first child and the last child, right? Now we can obviously do the same thing with unordered list, right? So I'm going to say over here, this is going to be first child, right? And this is going to be, let's say, font size over here, let's say 40 pixels, right? So you can see that all of them right away got 40 pixels, right? Now, what if I go over here and actually add a heading 2 or heading 6 or heading 1 or any kind of element, right? So let's say over here, I'm going to say heading 1 and I'm going to say over here, I am the first child now, right? Child now. And you can see what happens, right? Whatever the rule would they actually wrote over here, right? Whatever the rule was over here with the 40 pixels that we had over here, it's actually not working. And the reason why it's not working because unordered list is not the first child, right? In our body, the first child over here now is the heading 1, right? So therefore this rule is overwritten. The same thing would work over here if I would go back over here and if I would say, like, let's just say a random link, right? So I'm going to say href and index HTML, like hello, whatever, look at me, right? Look at me. You can see again, right? 1 is not anymore number 1, right? Because it's not the first child. We're only targeting the list item, right? If it is the first child, right? Now we're going to look at a next video how we can work around this by a different selector, right? But just remember when you're working with a first child or last child, or the next one that we're going to work at is going to be nth child, right? So we can write over here list item, then we can have a nth child, right? And then let's say over here, I'm going to say 2n over here like this. And I'm going to say background color yellow, right? So now you can see that every second list item, right, is actually turning yellow, right? But again, remember that it is only if it is actually the list item, right? Remember that. If it's not, if there's another child that's actually number 2, this is not going to work, right? Now what we can also add is, let's say for this list item, right? So we're targeting number 2. But what we can do is we can just copy this guy over here. And I can just add +1 over here. And let's say we're going to turn it to, I don't know, black, white, yellow, blue, brown, I don't know, brown, something like this, right? So you can see what happens, right? So we have the second one, then we have the +1, right? Just be careful that over here you can see that this guy also gets the same thing, right? So we have 2 + 1 over here, right? And this is how we can work with a first child, last child, and nth child +1, right? So, or nth child in general, right? Here we would specifically say the number, and here we are targeting basically element that is right next to it. But remember that actually it needs to be the first element, right? So if the unordered list is going to be the second one, we're not going to be targeting with this font size, right? You can see that it's not going to be working, right? It's only going to be working if the unordered list is going to be the first child. And now let's look at how we can fix some of the problems that we run into when we're using first of child, right? So remember we had an issue if we were targeting this unordered list, right? And we set as first child, and over here the problem is if we add some kind of element, right? So the way we can fix it over here, if we would go over here and would use first of type. So I'm going to say unordered list over here, and I'm going to say first of type, right? And over here, what I'm going to say, this is going to be, let's say again, we're going to use the same thing. We're going to say font size, and let's say 40 pixels, right? And you can see what happens, right? Now that I'm actually saying first of type, right? Whatever I will have, right? The first unordered list, right? This is going to have the font size, right? Now it's obviously not going to work on all of them, right? Because if I'm going to add another unordered list, right? So I'm just going to copy and paste. You can see that this is going to have the same font size as a regular one, right? Only the first of type, right? And we can actually delete this guy over here like this, save it, and let's just change it around. Let's say from the unordered list, we're going to say list item, right? And again, you can see that I'm targeting the first one, right? Because what I'm saying is first of type, right? So the first of type of list items, right? And obviously we can do the same thing with a last of type, right? So we're going to do over here, and we're going to change it around over here like 2, right? So last of type also has 40 pixels, right? And now we can use also a nth of type, right? So over here I'm going to say nth, right? Nth of type over here. Let's say we're going to start with every third, right? So every third one, right? And we're going to say background color, let's say red, right? So now you can see that we have a number 3, number 6, and number 9 is the color red, right? Now obviously if we add this, let's say +1 or +2, however we want to do actually, right? So now you can see how we flipped, right? So now it's not only the third one, but it's actually the third one after, right? So we have 3, actually we have 4, then we have 6, which is actually 7, then we have actually 9, but it's actually number 1, right? Now what I'm going to do is over here, let's say this one, we're going to have a yellow, right? A yellow like this, but let's just copy and paste it and have it as number 3. So I'm going to copy and paste this and delete this guy. Let's say over here we're going to have a red over here like this, right? So we have again back 3, 6, 9 red, and then whatever is after, right? This is going to be actually a yellow, right? So you can see that we can use the same way, right? The same as last child, we can use the nth type, right? But the difference is now we're actually targeting the list items, right? Or under the list, whatever, right? We're targeting the element that is actually first of type, right? Because when we were working with first of child, right? If there was some other element that actually was a, let's say for that specific number, right? Where actually it wasn't working, right? But for the first of type and last of type, it is working as we actually expect. Now let's look at only type and only child and what would be the difference, right? So here I'm going to create a div over here like this, and I'm just going to say that this div is going to contain a very silly text, right? So this is going to be hello world, right? So we save this one over here. So now we have a div and we have hello world, right? If we go back to main CSS and let's say over here, I'm going to say div, and I'm going to say this is going to be only child over here like this, right? And I'm going to say a background color, right? And I'm going to say, let's say red, right? So over here, I save it as red, right? So now you can see, right? So I'm targeting the div, right? That is the only child, right? So background color, this is going to be over here, red, right? So obviously if I go back over here, let's say over here, I'm going to add another div, right? You can see what happens, right? Now it's not anymore a only child over here like this, right? Because I have multiple, right? So now I have two of them, right? So this one only works if it's the only child, right? So over here, if I would go back inside over here within this div, right? And if I would create a div over here like this, and I'm going to say hello world, you can see what happens, right? Again, now back again, this is the only child, right? Because within the body, I have two divs. However, within this first div, right? I have the actual another div inside there, which is a child, right? So therefore it has a background color red, right? So this is how the only child would work, right? So now let's look at the only type, right? So I'm going to delete this, right? And again, we're going to go back over here. We're going to say, sorry, I actually deleted the wrong thing. I needed to delete a CSS rule, and this actually should stay the same, right? So I'm going to say hello world over here like this. And I'm going to say main CSS, right? And again, I'm going to target div, and I'm going to say over here only, and only of type, right? So I'm going to say background color, and let's say we're going to say blue over here, right? So only of type, background color blue over here, div, right? And you can see that I didn't do this one correctly, but if we go back over here, right? So you can see that this wasn't div, right? So this was my mistake, right? So now if we save this, right? So you can see that it originally works the same way, right? So we have div, this is going to be a hello world, right? And because it is the only of type, it actually, the background color is blue, right? And now let's check it out again. What happens if we actually place, again, another div, right? So hello world, right? So first of all, you can see what happens, right? So again, this one disappears over here, like this, right? So we don't have any more only type. We have actually two of them, right? But what if we again go back inside, right? And if we add another div, right? So div, and over here, we're going to say hello world, right? So what you can see what happens, again, if we have the only type, right? Only of type over here, this is actually working. You can see that it works the same way, right? So only this div over here right now, this is going to be a blue, right? However, if I delete this guy over here, if I delete this, go back to main CSS, you can see what happens, right? Only of type, it's actually both of them, right? Because both of them are actually only one of type, right, for the body, and also within this div, right? If you remember with the last of child, it wouldn't have worked, right? So if we go only of child, right, only child over here, right, you can see that only one of them is, right? So the main one is not going to be, because there's actually two divs over here, right? But if we're using only of type over here, right, they're actually, both of them are actually light up. You can see over here, right? Because for both of them, the body, right? For the body, it would be one of the type, and also within the div, it would be only of type of div.